Welcome back to the Joyous Kingdom. I'm Cade. Recently, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Meta, recently known as Facebook, went on the Tim Ferriss podcast. Tim Ferriss is a massive entrepreneur. He built this massive company, super rich, super successful, wrote a best-selling book called The 4-Hour Workweek. I'm sure you know of him. I just love seeing thought leaders and big successful people talk about Web3 and the metaverse because they've kind of navigated this sphere and they've been successful. I just want to hear their opinion on these things. So I'll be reacting to the metaverse portion of this podcast. But before I do, make sure you click that like button, subscribe to the channel, join the kingdom for more NFT content. You don't want to miss any of this stuff. If you already follow me on Twitter, if you're not my Discord down below in the description, you are only hurting yourself, fam. As you know, the goal of this channel is to instill the knowledge and confidence it's going to take to navigate this metaverse on your own one day. So if that sounds good to you, let's get into the video. If you're an NFT project and you want to work together, just go to my website at joyouskingdom.com, go to the work with me section, and then shoot me an email. The link to my website is down below in the description. And yes, that does involve the commission brutally honest reviews for new NFT projects.
So one thing that struck me about Ready Player One, especially in the cinematic version, so the movie itself, is that you have this incredible tactile environment where they're grabbing objects and interacting with objects, feeling impact and so on. But then you see them cut to an external shot of someone in a, say, trailer where they wouldn't actually have that kind of feedback, even though they have haptic suits in Ready Player One. What do you see as sort of the roadmap for that type of interactivity? The more I thought about this, the more I realized, well, surface level stimulation may not be quite as immersive as people would hope for. Do we need to wait for some type of Neuralink type of computer brain interface where we're actually stimulating the brain and not simulating, but actually producing sort of the perception of kinesthetic engagement? How do you think about the future of that type of hardware and interaction?
Think about all the Zoom calls that you've been on over the last couple of years during COVID. There's no real eye contact over video conference.
Yeah.
Because your cameras are in different places. So,
yeah.
And even without that, it still gets you pretty far. So in VR today, adding realistic eye contact, each of these things, it's like, you kind of almost don't realize that you're missing them. And then when you have them, you're like, whoa, that's like a really core part of the human experience is being able to, make eye contact and hold eye contact with someone and like have that gaze.
This is a great point, and you may not actually pick up on this unless you do interviews or podcasts in person or online a lot. It's one of those things that if you do a lot of virtual podcasts, you get comfortable, you're in your own space. They're not really there. They're there, but you're very aware that they're like in their own room, in their screen, way across the world more than likely. And doing podcasts in person, actually conversing in real life, there's way more things that you pick up on in conversation, body expression, just little, like you don't know how to be sometimes because they're right there, they can see you. You can't have your notes on your phone here and your laptop and the screen over here and your assistant over here like talking and like all those things. So it's way different doing things in person. And as Mark is saying, it's going to be the hardest part about getting this VR thing and getting people to be wanting to spend time in the metaverse is like, how real can this feel, to the point where we can kind of basically just forget about the fact that we're in this metaverse and spend that mental energy focusing on just having experience in the metaverse.
If we get to a point where there's almost a universal basic income provided by the broad spectrum of jobs that you can have in the metaverse or online, what do you think some of the societal effects will be of that?
Anyone can create a space, but then spaces can be nested in other spaces, right? So you can basically create a building or a store, and then that can be inside a city that someone else creates. And then there's the question there of, okay, well, how do you govern that?
Right.
Who gets a say in what policies, who can enter it? How do taxes work? Like, what's the basic business model of that space? What are the design codes around what are you allowed to build there? All these different dimensions. And basically the physical world is, there's a lot of it, but it is at the end of the day, more finite than what we're going to have with the virtual world. So, not everyone can kind of get to be the mayor of their own virtual space and see how that evolves. But I think part of what we're going to get to see is you're going to have, whether they could be, young people in Philippines or anywhere else around the world, experimenting with basically creating worlds that are not just a single space or an experience, but actually like an environment or a polity in a way that other people can kind of be a part of. And I think that there will be sort of pretty interesting innovation, social and economic and governance innovation, as long as this gets designed in a good way. So I guess more than any specific policy idea, I think this could end up being a way to basically explore a lot of different ideas and kind of see which of these different environments that evolve are going to be appealing to people in different ways. So I think that's going to be wild to watch play out, and it's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to.
This is why I'm building my Joyish Kingdom brand. The Joyish Kingdom can either be inside of another thing, but at some point, obviously, I want it to grow and be the conglomerate umbrella that houses a whole lot of different communities and like artists and stuff like that. And that's why I'm building. And the best thing about Web3 is that you really don't even need like a super specific skill. Like sometimes you just being funny, nice, cool, friends with a lot of people, knowing a lot of people in the space is huge. And there are jobs that can be created for you, right? Like you can be offered a position on the team as a fucking advisor. You know, the most like bullshit job ever where you're like, I'm an advisor. It's like, what does that mean? It's like, I don't really know, but they pay me sometimes, right? There are some people who are like that. And they bounce around different teams and stuff because they know the space well, because they're involved and they know what's going on. They know who to talk to. They know who to pair up together and stuff like that. And so because of the sheer amount of jobs that are going to be in this infinite fucking world of the metaverse, I'm like, bro, why the fuck would you not want to make yourself as well known as possible while the space is this fucking big? It's so small. It's so small. You can be one of the most influential thought figures in the space with like 2,000 followers on Twitter. Like, dude, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? So like because of that, I'm like, why would you not be going 150 miles per hour during this bear market? This is my little motivational piece to you. If you're in the space right now and you are just participating, you're not trying to like contribute, you're making a mistake. You're making a massive mistake. And in 5 to 10 years, when this place is fully established and things are happening and there are jobs, you're going to regret not having started 5 years ago watching Cade react to Mark Zuckerberg and Tim Ferriss talk about the metaverse in a YouTube video. All right? Start this shit today. Get on Twitter, get on Discords, get into every single Twitter space that's ever available every single time and just network and grow in the space. Learn, talk, connect. This is the time.
For Live in the Future, one of the big things that we're doing is, I don't just want teams to be working distributed and working over video conference. I also want them to be using workrooms and using their kind of VR headsets. Workrooms is this product. It's the VR product that we built for collaboration. I think it's great. It's early still, but it's fascinating. It's like you're in a meeting and you're sitting around a table, and even though the kind of fidelity isn't quite as photorealistic on the avatars yet as say the conversation that we're having now, the fact that you can sit around a table and you can see people's gestures and you can have a side conversation. So if there's 10 people around the table, you can turn to the person next to them and ask them a question. Yeah, there could be multiple conversations going on in the room, like a normal room, but obviously you can't do anything like that over a video conference. There are a bunch of things like that that actually make it in some ways feel more real already than video conferences, even though the people are still the avatars are still very stylized and cartoony. So, but we basically have a rule that everyone who's in, across the company, who's in leadership or management should be basically doing at least like one standing meeting a week in workrooms, right? Because that's like, okay, we want to get the feedback loop going on that, right? It's like that way that team now is overwhelmed with feedback on how to get it to be even better. But I think one of the outcomes of this is like, I think Workrooms is going to probably learn what they need to do to be a great product a lot faster than a lot of others in the space. So I think that's kind of one way to operationalize these. But yeah, you got to operationalize them if you want them to be real. Otherwise, they're just words that you put on a website somewhere.
And I think when someone like Mark Zuckerberg talks about this thing, people are like, shut up, you fucking reptile, you power-hungry bastard. Like, people get upset about these things. But the truth is, if you haven't worked at home before, seriously, like I worked at home for the past year straight. I can tell you right now, after a year, I'm sick of it. I'm fucking sick of it. I love it so much. But I need at least twice a week to get out and banter with fucking human beings and talk shit about stuff and like go out. Like that's why I got a job at the bar. Twice a week, I just go there, make a little bit of money, talk to a bunch of people, get out of my apartment, get out of my room, and kind of just like how he said, like have side conversations, like see human beings gesture and like move and like be social and stuff. Like that's something that you don't really realize you need until you don't have it for a very long time. And like for me, I was working at home, and every now and then I would get out and go talk to people, and it was almost like weird, and I was like, I don't like this. But then after I kind of forced myself to the situation, after I started to kind of crave it, it changed, and I was like, I really fucking like that, actually. Like, I think there is a balance that needs to be there. Now, definitely in different parts of your life, maybe you have to go balls to the wall, work online, don't talk to anybody for a certain period of time, and just lock yourself away. I get that too. But at some point, you have to come back to balance, right? It's some version of it, at least at some point in life. And I think this stuff does matter. And these are the kind of ideas that people are talking about, these high-level corporations. That's why Walmart's in, Starbucks is in, fucking Nike's in, Adidas, every single big company is coming into the fucking Web3 world because they see it. And guess what? They waited until the bear market. That's a great sign. If you don't know if you don't know anything about like markets and Web3 and honestly, just like emerging industries and stuff, it's a good thing when these companies are coming in now. When everyone's kind of left, all the big degenerates and idiots who are trading and trying to make $500 million in a year kind of thing, they're all gone because like the money it's just not that kind of market anymore, right? So because we're in this recession, but that's when all the companies are coming in to buy up stuff, buy up land, build in the metaverse, hire people for cheap because people are willing to work for cheap, right? These are the things that are happening right now in this emerging industry of Web3, and if you don't see it, you're literally just gonna be left behind. That's why I'm making this video. I want to get people who don't know anything about the Web3 space to just get in. It's such a small world right now that you have no barrier to entry to get in. You can make a Twitter account tomorrow and be relevant the next day. It's probably not gonna happen, but like it's possible. It's online. You're like social media. You know what I mean?
And I'm wondering how, let's just say in the case of Instagram, some challenges that perhaps you foresee. And I can imagine, for instance, if people can turn hypothetically posts into NFTs, how that might affect, let's just say, content moderation and safety precautions and so on, if they actually have ownership of their posts.
I mean, at some level, you can make things censorship resistant, which has a bunch of equities. And there's certainly a lot of people who feel like their expression is restricted online more than they would like. But that also prevents, if you really can't stop people from expressing things, then how are you going to fight against terrorism or child exploitation or things that people think are like really awful, even the people who generally want more stuff to be allowed online. So I think that they're really removing the ability for anyone to do any kind of moderation at all in a broader platform, I think is problematic. I think in something like messaging, we don't expect the people who run our messaging platforms, whether it's us or Apple or whoever, to go kind of moderate a message that you send in private. But if it's sort of this distinction between the living room and the town square, right? If you're in a space that's a broader space, then I think that there is a little more need to make sure that things conform to the values that society wants, right? And reducing things that are just really, that I think everyone agrees are bad, like terrorism and child exploitation and bullying and things like that.
Yeah, this is a tough question for anyone to answer, especially Mark, considering how many people hate him. There's not really a right answer other than like, we'll fucking see. Like, we're going to try some things, we're going to experiment, we're going to test, we're probably going to get a lot of hate for it, a lot of love, and that's just how it's going to be. But he's right. Like, we're not sure how it's going to be. We don't know what it's even going to look like, right? Like, there could be literally someone could be working on, like Jack Dorsey right now, Web 5, which is decentralized social media. Who knows if that'll work, right? There's always a reason that there's some level of centralization. You can't get anything done without some level of like hierarchy of like someone in charge of something who decides rules and boundaries and stuff like that. Like, there has to be something there. Like, for anyone who wants, pure just anarchy in the streets online, like, that's fine. But he's right. Like, child exploitation, child pornography, terrorism, those kind of things are scary. They're big. You don't really want like your kid who's running around on Facebook seeing some big posts like that. But for me, I mean, I feel like if you can chop it there, like, I don't know what else you'd want. Like, terrorism, child exploitation, that's pretty much it. Like, everything else, I'm like, I feel like you should let that go. And I don't know, like, I think some of these big social media platforms have kind of taken that thing of like, well, we have to protect against these things, and kind of taken it a little bit too far and banning things that probably shouldn't be banned. I think that's the real problem here. So when people think of censorship, they think of people deleting posts for stupid reasons, right? Which is happening a fucking lot, by the way. A fucking lot. Way too much. People are being deplatformed because of their beliefs on the world. That's crazy, right? Unless their beliefs in the world are child exploitation or terrorism, I'm like, dude, I mean, you can't just deplatform anyone. I mean, that's fucked up, you know what I mean? So it's a really tough conversation. It's not really hard if both parties and people who are involved in the conversation are mature and are able to take their, their ego out of the situation and kind of start to look at things from other people's perspectives. Like, what if you were running Meta? What if you were in charge of censorship? Like, think about all the hundreds of things and thousands of things you have to think about, because every decision hits a domino and hits another domino and goes into this other domino over here and this way, and there's all these things you got to think about and you don't really know until you're there, right? And so that's why it's important to have these conversations, why it's important to listen to these podcasts, because if you just look at CEO Mark Zuckerberg, you're gonna be like, fuck that guy, he should do this, he should do that. It's like, okay, well, do you think you'd do that if you're in his position? With his experience, with the amount of people who are relying on him, what about this implication? What about that implication? It's really hard to think about that unless you let your brain open up and be a little bit more empathetic and try and be critical thinkers instead of people who just go with their knee-jerk reaction, which frustrates me so much. And that's why I'm glad you're watching this video. And if you're subscribed to this channel and you're a Joyager, you're not one of those people who just goes off their knee-jerk reaction and writes a fucking hate comment because you're a fucking nerd, right? Don't do that. Don't. Knee-jerk reactions are so stupid. Have a little bit of emotional cap. Control yourself. These kind of conversations can and should be having a lot more. We're just not able to because there's so many people who are so polarized one side or the other and so angry at something, at somebody. You look in the comments of every TikTok, you see a video that's like some kind of like very relatable thing that a lot of people kind of hits home for them, and they go, oh, like so-and-so does this, like this always happens. Like, you can see people are fucking hurting. They're hurting online. You can see it in the comment sections. People are so fucking angry at everyone for everything. And that is why every single thing on TV is drama and arguing. Like, that's what people's inside of reality is. And unfortunately, that's what we're seeing in the real world.
You put a lot of time and thought into the oversight board. What is your assessment of how that's going?
Society needs a network of different institutions that it feels like are legitimate or have some legitimacy for making decisions in order to basically accept the decisions and feel like they're fair. And I think one basic issue that we've found ourselves in is that there's just no way that any single private company should be responsible for arbitrating so many questions of social values, right? Between free expression and safety, or locking things down to ensure privacy versus making sure that the marketplace can be open and competitive, right? These are real issues, and there's equities on all sides, and there's no single decision that any company can make on any of them that I think is going to be universally accepted. So I think therefore you really want to not set up a situation where one company is kind of has to make a lot of these decisions by themselves. That's why I wanted to create this oversight board. It does seem like there's a little bit more acceptance when the oversight board weighs in on something complicated than when we just do it ourselves. And I think part of that was we put a lot of thought into making sure that the people who are on the oversight board are kind of world renowned in terms of a focus on human rights, really focused on free expression as well, because at the end of the day, these platforms are about giving people a voice, diverse, spanning a large portion of the globe. But it wasn't obvious that it's legitimacy isn't like a binary thing. It's not like either it's completely rejected or it's completely accepted by everyone. We were mindful in setting this up, and I think the oversight board has also done a good job itself in kind of managing its independence. It is a completely independent organization from us, and it has to be. And kind of its independence is super important for its continued legitimacy. Overall, I'd say I'm sort of optimistic about how it's going, but I think building that sort of trust and legitimacy also takes time. It's not like a thing that you can just turn on in a year and then all of a sudden people will be like, okay, this thing exists, great. It's going to be, it making decisions, it often overruling us or rebuking us on things, and people seeing that we respect its independence and its authority and going and implementing that. That's, I think, how it basically builds legitimacy over time.
Just like when you go to a restaurant, you've never been a server before, for example. You've never been a waiter, never been a bartender, never worked in the food and beverage industry. You go to a restaurant, things go wrong. You go, how hard can this be? Why is this to happen? Why is my water? Where's my dessert? Like, all these problems. Like, it can't be that hard. And then you go and you become a bartender, you become a server, you're like, oh shit, all right, half the stuff wasn't even in my hands. This thing went wrong. This person didn't show up. We didn't have a cook. my general manager fucked up. He was like, all these things go wrong, and you go, oh, I'm so much like, I understand why things go wrong. It's normal, and things always go wrong all the time, and it's not a big deal. It's just a big deal to people in their personal lives right at that moment when something goes wrong that adds to their pile of things that are already wrong with their life. Their mom died, and like this person's mad at them, and then my fucking dessert won't come, and now I'm pissed at the server, and it's the server's fault, when it wasn't the server's fault at all. It was never personal. It was never meant to be personal. Just you took it personally, you know what I mean? But you wouldn't make that mistake. You wouldn't take it personally if you had been a waiter. And this is why I'm so insistent on people working in Web3 and just getting a little bit of experience. I don't care what it is. I don't care if you're a fucking third-rate moderator in a dead fucking NFT project. Get some experience under your belt and see what it's really like. See what's really like. I was a member of the ZUCKERBERG team for 6 months. I worked on their team for 6 months. I was in all the meetings. I was in the Discords. I was doing all the things, right? And because of that experience working behind the scenes of an NFT project that was doing very well, I now know all these extra things, all these extra little nuances that allows me to connect with these NFT project founders. My interviews, it allows me to do very stellar NFT project reviews, which is where my entire online business came from. It allows me to have a good finger on the pulse of what's going on in the Web3 world for any kind of consulting and advising I do. Gives me all the tools I need to be a content creator because I took that step and I worked for an NFT project team. I've done all the positions. I know what it's like. I don't get angry when the mint's going wrong, when stupid shit's happening, because I've been there and I've done that. Right? Like, that's important. It's important that if you're going to be in this space to have some level of empathy, some level of perspective. So that is the one thing I will leave you with. I hope you enjoy this reaction video. I don't do too many of these. I want to get into more of them. Honestly, the last time I reacted to a podcast, I believe, other than like the NGMI one a couple weeks ago, was the one with Gary Vee, and maybe it was Mark Zuckerberg, actually. I think I did it whenever Mark Zuckerberg goes on a big podcast. So I'll do it again if I see another good podcast. If there's another podcast you want me to react to, drop it down in the comments. I would love to know. Thank you so much for being here. Click that like button for me. Subscribe to the channel. Join the kingdom for more NFT Web3 related content. If you made it to the very end of this video, code word is gonna be fucking metaverse. Are you kidding me? Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Join the Discord down below in the description. Unless you want to miss all the free alpha, right? If you want to see more of me right now, click on one of these boxes on the other side of me. Until next time, continue on your voyage. Continue to learn and be grateful you're alive watching this video. Bye.